So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about measurements. So we're going to jump to this slide. And remember, we were talking about tables 1.1 and 1.2. So these are the SI prefixes. This is table 1.2. So these are something that you should memorize. So you should know that deci is 0.1 or 10 to the minus 1 of the base unit. Centi is 10 to the minus 2. This is something that you have to sort of get into your mind now. So you want to memorize this table, these two tables, and have that in your toolkit for when we get started. Because the next thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about measurements, and we're going to start to use some of these things. Now, the reason why you have to memorize the SI prefixes is because when we do unit conversions, that's going to be the basis for a lot of unit conversions. Okay, so let's start with measurements. Okay, so the main thing with measurements is this is something that allows us to quantify. And so I'm just going to write that word down. This allows us to quantify properties of matter. So instead of just saying like instead of saying something like I have a lot of something, you can actually quantify something. Like, for example, I have a dozen eggs. By quantifying it, instead of saying I have a lot of eggs, which could be any number of things, by saying I have a dozen eggs, we all know that you now have 12 eggs. So that it actually puts a number on it, and it's something that we can compare across, we can compare as different scientists, we can actually compare our results from one another. So the thing that we use for measurements is we use this thing called the SI, or the International System of Units. And the SI units are what were on that previous page. So we're going to talk about the SI units now, but this is an arbitrary system that's universally accepted. So there's nothing about the SI units that make them better than anything else. It's just that what makes them very useful is that everyone around the world can use them, and then that makes things very comparable. So that's why we use SI measurements. So let's talk about the first one, which is length. And the base unit for length is the meter. Now there are a couple of other things that you should know. So when we want to convert between the SI system and the English system, we can say that the inch, which is in the English system, is equal to 2.54 centimeters, which is in the SI system. So this will be a good unit conversion to have in the back of your mind as you're doing this. So we all kind of know what length is. Length is just a distance. It's a measurement of the size of something, effectively. So what we're really going to do is we really want to jump into unit conversions. So for example, let's say we want to do a conversion where we say how many inches are in 15 centimeters, for example. So we want to do this conversion. Well, a lot of you guys probably will go immediately to what you would do in a math class, which is to start with a proportion. So you would say something like this. Well, okay, I know that for every 1 inch there's 2.54 centimeters. So you can start to create a proportion. So you could say, well, okay, if there's 2.54 centimeters for every 1 inch, then how many inches would there be in how many inches would there be in 15 centimeters? So you'll notice that the units kind of match here. I have inches on the bottom and I have centimeters on the top, and we can do this. We can solve this. So we can do some algebra. We can say, okay, 2.54 centimeters times x is equal to 15 centimeters times 1 inch. Okay, now normally you would just write 15 there in sort of a math class, but we have to make sure that we have the units correct. And then if we wanted to get rid of this, what we would do is we would divide by the 2.54 centimeters to get the x by itself. And then we would say, well, x, okay, so now the centimeters cancel out, so we get this. So now we get x is equal to 5.91 inches, because that unit of inches is still left over in that proportionality. So that's how you would do this if you were doing proportionalities. But the problem with this is it's very slow to set it up this way. And if you want to do multiple conversions, there's a better way of doing this. There's a better way of representing this type of math, and that's called a unit conversion. So the unit conversion way of doing this is to take that proportionality, and we're going to use it in a sort of a sequenced way. Some people kind of refer to this as stoichiometry, although stoichiometry really is when we get into moles, but it's the same idea as stoichiometry. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a start and an end and a unit conversion. So the first thing we have to do is we have to identify what our unit conversion is, and in this case we know that there's 1 inch for every 2.54 centimeters. So that's our unit conversion. In this case, we're going from, we're saying, okay, we have 15.0 centimeters. We want to interconvert this with inches. So we want to we're basically asking, well, how many inches are in 15 centimeters? So we kind of have a start and an end point. So we identify our start point and we identify our end point, right? So we want to know if we have 15 centimeters, at the end we want to know how many inches we have. And we have this link between them, which we know that there is, for every 1 inch, there's 2.54 centimeters. So the link between centimeters and inches is this unit conversion, which is a proportionality between inches and centimeters. So now what we can do is we can set up our actual unit conversion. So at the very beginning, when you're doing unit conversions, you may actually want to put an explicit start and end, as I'm doing here. And this may help you, because in this case, we know that we're going to start with the 15 centimeters. You start with the thing that you know, and you end with the thing that you're asking. So if you look at the question, how many inches are in 15 centimeters? It's the 15 centimeters that's the starting point, and then we're saying, well, how many inches is that? So that's the end. So at the end, you're going to want to put your unit, which is inches. So now we know, in essence, we've rewritten this item up here into the start of a unit conversion. And a thing that I'd like to point out is this unit conversion here of 1 inch per 2.54 centimeters, we can write this as a proportion in any way that we want. So in essence, you can write this in any one of two ways. You can say, well, okay, there are 2.54 centimeters for every 1 inch. That's one way of writing it. Or you can write, for every 1 inch, there is 2.54 centimeters. So we have this unit conversion we can take these units and we can put them either on top or on the bottom because they're proportional to each other. So how do we decide what we want to do? Well, whenever you set up a unit conversion, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to put a line here in the middle that has your proportion. And then immediately what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take the units, and whatever unit you have up here on top, we're going to want to put on the bottom. Before we plug anything in, we're just going to get our units set up. So we put the centimeters on the bottom because we know those will cancel. And then on top, we put the inches because we want our inches to be our end product. And then we just fill in from the unit conversion. So we know that there are 2.54 centimeters for every 1 inch. And then that comes from the unit conversion, and we can write that unit conversion in either way. And the way that we select that is based on where we're starting and where we're ending. So wherever you start from, that is going to be the unit that goes on the bottom to cancel. So now we can actually cancel out our units, because when we divide by centimeters, they're going to go away. So we get 15 divided by 2.54 is equal to inches. And so again, we get 5.91 inches. And if you look, we've actually done the exact same math. So the math that we're doing here is we're going to take the 15 divided by 2.54 and we get 5.91. If we go back to the previous slide, that is the exact same math that we did here. 15 divided by 2.54 gives us our answer in inches, and that's what we get here. So that's how a unit conversion is set up. So this is the better way, the way that we want to see you setting things up in the class. So now let's look at a unit conversion where we do a couple of different steps. So, for example, here, let's take a look at the advantage of this. So the oxygen-oxygen double bond, and you guys are probably going, oh my god, oxygen-oxygen double bonds already. Really, it doesn't make a difference, because all we're going to be doing is just doing a unit conversion. It turns out that this is 121 picometers. So 121 picometers is the distance between these two oxygen atoms in the double bond. So now let's just say, like, how many millimeters are in 121 picometers? So this is a good question because this could be something that you would want to know. You might want to convert the picometers to millimeters for some mathematical operation to figure out more about this oxygen-oxygen double bond. So again, we're going to use unit conversions to get us to where we have to go. Now, if we go back to our slide here, and let's take a look at this. So we have pico all the way down here, and then we have milli all the way up here. And unfortunately, we don't have a direct relationship between the two of them, right? So we know that when we read this table, so let me kind of help you start to read this table a little bit. So when we read this table, in essence, what this thing is saying, as we read it, is that, let's take pico, for example. Well, what this is saying is that for every 1 times 10 to the minus 12 meters is equal to 1 picometer. That's how we read this. So see the multiple? So we take the base unit of meter, and this 10 to the minus 12 tells us, well, for every 1 times 10 to the minus 12 meters is equal to 1 picometer. Another way of saying this would be that for every 1 meter, you have 1 times 10 to the 12th picometers. They're both the same. They're just the inverse of each other. It doesn't really matter. Because the table is written this way, I'm going to use this for the most part in this in the way that we describe it. So when I do this, I'm going to say that for every 1 times 10 to the minus 12 meters is 1 picometer. So a picometer is much smaller than a meter, is what this is basically saying. We can do the same thing for the millimeter. So what this says is for every 1 times 10 to the minus third meters is equal to 1 millimeter. Again, anytime where it's to the minus 3, this is 1,000th of a meter is a millimeter, so we know it's smaller. If we do kilo, for example, this is for every 1 times 10 to the third meters is equal to 1 kilometer. So this tells you that there are many, many more meters than there are many meters in 1 kilometer. So the kilometer is longer than a meter. But this is how you can use this table. So this 10 to the minus 12, you can write this immediately, that for every 1 times 10 to the minus 12 meters is equal to 1 picometer. That's what you're memorizing when we do this. So let's go back to our slide. So now we have 2 unit conversions here that we can work with. We have for every 1 times 10 to the minus 12 picometers, for every 1 times 10 to the minus 12 meter, got to get this right, is equal to 1 picometer. I get that from the table. And we know that for every 1 times 10 to the minus 3 meters is equal to 1 millimeter. So now how do we start working with this problem? Well, let's just start breaking the problem down. We have our start and we have our end. And our start is going to be 121 picometers. Our end is going to be millimeters. And so we have that. So that we didn't have to do anything for. This we get, the start and the end we get directly from the question. How many millimeters are in 121 picometers? Now the issue becomes, what do we do with these unit conversions? Well, we have to start to use them. So you could come up with a unit conversion that goes directly from picometers to millimeters. You can take these two and figure out how to come up with a unit conversion that goes direct. However, that's not what we typically do. The easiest thing to do, rather than trying to come up with a unit conversion on the fly, is we do something called going through the base unit. So in essence, when we say going through the base unit, what we do is we say, well, first we're going to convert picometers to meters. That gets us to some common ground, because in both of these cases we have meters. So if we can get to meters, once we have meters, then we can get back to millimeters. And so once we go from meters, we can then go to millimeters. So our first unit conversion that we're going to use is going to be, well, for every 1 times 10 to the minus 12th picometers is equal to, for every 1 times 10 to the minus 12 meters is equal to 1 picometer. And then in the next one, for every 1 times 10 to the minus third meters is equal to 1 millimeter. So now we have our unit conversions kind of planned out based on what we memorized from the table. So this comes from the table. Oops. So this comes from the table. So let's start setting this up. So again, our first unit conversion, we have picometers, and we're going to put meters on top. Now the reason why we put picometers on the bottom is because the picometers are here. So then we grab the numbers. So we know that for every 1 picometer, that comes from over here, I have 1 times 10 to the minus 12 meters. So now I have my units in meters. We can cancel out the picometers, and now I'm in meters. And now we're going to go from meters to millimeters. So we have millimeters on top, so we're going to put, we have meters on top, so we're going to put meters on the bottom. And then we have to put millimeters on top because we want to get rid of them, because we want those as our end product. So the meters are going to go away. So now we fill this in. So for every 1 times 10 to the minus 3 meters, we have 1 millimeter. And now we've created a sequence of unit conversions going through the base unit. By going through the base unit, I mean we're going to meters, and then from meters we're going to millimeters. That's what we mean by going through the base unit. And then we can do our calculation. So in your calculator, you're going to say, I'm going to plug in 121 times 1 times 10 to the minus 12 times 1. You don't have to do the 1. So we basically multiply everything on top, and then we press. So, and then in your calculator, you're going to press divide for everything on the bottom. So 121 picometers times 1 times 10 to the minus 12 meters times 1 millimeter, and then we divide by 1 picometer, and then we divide again by 1 times 10 to the minus 3 meters, and that's going to get us to the millimeters. So at the end here, we're going to get 1.21 times 10 to the minus 7th millimeters. Now, in the video that I have of me going through these unit conversions, I actually have the calculator shown. So you can actually see me plug these things into the calculator. If this is something that you're not familiar with plugging it into the calculator, you can watch me do those plugins in the calculator. Let's just try one more quickly since we have some time. So let's convert 5 feet to centimeters. So we need to identify the proper unit conversions that we need. Now, with feet, this is a non-SI unit, but we know some things about feet because we have experience with them. So the unit conversion that you're going to memorize that we just introduced to you guys was that for every 1 inch, there is 2.54 centimeters. So that's going to be helpful to us because we want to go from we want to get to centimeters. So we definitely have to have a unit conversion that involves centimeters. Now the problem is we have feet and we have inches. So we have to think about what is the relationship between feet and inches. And we know that for every 1 foot there is 12 inches. So that kind of gives you a sense for how we're thinking about this, right? Now we're going to use our unit conversions to figure this out. So again, we're going to do our start and our end, and we don't have to do anything for that. We're converting 5 feet, which is our starting point, and our end, which is what we want to know, is in centimeters. So now let's just start using our unit conversions to get to where we need to go. So if you want to plan this out, well, I have to go from feet to somewhere. And the common unit in these two unit conversions is inches. So I'm probably going to want to go to inches. And then from inches, I'm going to want to go to centimeters. So, and I have unit conversions to do that. So we're going to put feet on the bottom, and then we're going to put inches on top. And then we pull our values. Now, the reason why we put feet on the bottom is so that the units cancel out. So for every 1 foot, we have 12 inches. And then over here, we're going to put, for every 1 inch, we have 2.54 centimeters. So again, the reason why I'm putting inches on the bottom is because the inches have to cancel on top. Feet are going to cancel, and now we're left with just centimeters. So that's how you can plan out and start to use these unit conversions to do the math. So again, how do we actually plug this into our calculator? The way that you would plug this into your calculator is you'd hit 5, the multiplication button, times 12, then again hit the multiplication button times 2.54. So you multiply everything on top, and then you hit the division button, so you divide by 1, and then you divide again by 1. Now, at the beginning, you may want to just be pedantic about the dividing by 1s, but over time, you'll start to get experience and you'll realize that you don't have to divide by 1. So in this case, the endpoint is going to be 152.4 centimeters. And you know, if you wanted to go on, you could go on. Let's say that instead of doing this into centimeters, we wanted to go on to meters, right? Let's say that we wanted to keep going and convert this to meters. Well, we can do that very easily. So if we have 152.4 centimeters, we go to our table and we look it up, and we look up our unit conversion for centimeters to meters. So you've memorized this. So 1 times 10 to the minus 2 centimeters is, 1 times 10 to the minus 2 meters. As you can tell, I'm programmed the other way, so I always have to, is equal to, I did it again. Every 1 times 10 to the minus 2 meters is equal to 1 centimeter. I get that from the table, I've memorized that. And we plug it in. So we put centimeters on the bottom, we put meters on top, and we say for every 1 centimeter, there is 1 times 10 to the minus 2 meters. And this is going to give us 1.524 meters. Now, one thing that I haven't really focused on yet is significant figures. In this case, since we only have one significant figure at our starting point, we're only going to have one significant figure at our end point, even though I have more numbers there. But right now, I'm not terribly worried about the sig figs until after you get to your first recitation. So you may notice me doing significant figures here without necessarily explicitly saying that I'm doing it, but I am doing it. Okay, so now let's look at mass. So basically this is the quantity of matter in an object. So colloquially, mass is often interconverted with the term weight. A weight is actually not the same thing as a mass. A mass doesn't require gravity, whereas a weight does. So a mass is just how much material we have in something. So the standard unit for this is grams. And let's just do a quick unit conversion to kind of keep the momentum going. So let's just convert 25.0 milligrams to kilograms. So now again, we're immediately thinking, okay, I've got two SI units, milligrams and kilograms. I got to look up those things on the table, and I got to get my unit conversions from the table. And then from the table, I can start to create my start and end point and go forward. So with milligrams, we know that every 1 times 10 to the minus 3, every 1 times 10 to the minus 3 grams is equal to 1 milligram. I get that from the table. And then kilograms, for every 1 times 10 to the 3 grams, I have 1 kilogram. So I memorized from the table, and I can write those down immediately. Those are going to be my unit conversions. Now we start to set things up. So our starting point is going to be our 25.0 milligrams. Our end point is going to be in kilograms. And now we can plan out our conversions. So we know the first thing we're going to have to do is probably go through the base unit, where we're going to convert milligrams to grams, and then we're going to convert grams to kilograms using our unit conversions in those conversion steps. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put milligrams on the bottom and grams on top, and that's so that the milligrams cancel. And so our conversion is for every 1 milligram we have 1 times 10 to the minus 3 grams. Okay, that's a minus 3 grams there. And then for the next step, we're going to put grams on the bottom so that the grams cancel, and we're going to put kilograms on top, which is the unit we want to go to. So you see how we've gone through the base unit? So now for every 1 times 10 to the third grams, we have 1 kilogram, and I use my unit conversion there to get that. So what this is going to give me is a final answer of, and let me just clean this up so that it looks nice, so again, now here's how you're going to plug this into your calculator. You're going to say 25 times 1 times 10 to the minus 3, and then you're going to click enter. Then you're going to hit the divide button, and you're going to divide by 1 times 10 to the 3. And then that'll get you the right answer. So make sure you can get the right answer on your calculator. You're going to get 2.50 times 10 to the minus 5 kilograms for that.